All right. I'm pretty good. Rackham. Uh, Pretty good. Woke up early with screaming cats as usual, but
Nice.
that's a norm.
Perfect. I straight up muted myself the introduction, but that's perfect. People at least saw my lips move. So I'll just reintroduce Dylan really quickly. See, always something, always something. It's not a real show if I don't fuck up, if I don't fuck something up. So again, this is Dylan at Wizard18, and today Dylan is going to be gracing us with his presence, with his skills, and we have a ton of questions for Dylan. So Dylan, why don't you introduce yourself, give us your pronouns, and where we might find you online?
I don't have a ton of online presence outside of Discord.
Okay, where on Discord can we find you?
Oh god, I'd have to check that.
Mm.
Many different channels, but
Okay.
the main one I hang out on that's public would be Happy Jax RPG. Not always on there, but on and off.
Perfect. Cool. So Dylan, how long have you been a DM, and what prompted the taking up of the mantle?
I've been DMing for about 9 years now.
Oh, geez.
Since 10th grade. It's actually a very funny story with how I got started as a DM, although RPGs I have 4th, 5th grade. I first found out about D&D and I was playing like the old Dungeon Siege, if you remember those games.
Yeah.
Square Enix.
Yeah.
I actually saw a sale and I got them all because I used to play them with my grandfather for hours.
Dungeon Siege was awesome. It was like more of a... Wasn't it a little bit like Diablo 3 meets a little bit of roleplay elements, if I remember right?
Yeah, and you built your own party, and it was actually I think it was, other than the fighting game, one of the first licensed D&D games out there.
Nice.
Up there with Planescape and
Baldur's Gate and those guys.
Baldur's Gate, yeah.
Nice. So what, you said you started in 10th grade?
10th grade, yeah.
9 years, so you're in 19th grade now. And so what prompted the taking on of the mantle? What's the story there?
Well, I played my first character as a ranger. Can't remember anything beyond that.
Nice.
And ended up the DM stopped coming to the club at high school that we were playing at. Just started going to a different section of the club.
Okay.
Within 2 weeks of me starting to play D&D.
Nice.
And then someone just kind of pushed a book at me and said, "Why don't you try?" And that's how I got started. 2 weeks into D&D.
Nice. And do you remember what edition it was?
The 3.5.
Oh wow.
So back when it was way too bloated.
Yeah. That was a pretty hefty place to start. So how do you remember? Okay, so for the new DMs and GMs that might be in the audience today, do you remember what that felt like when somebody just gave you the books and said, "Go for it"?
It's the pit of your stomach drops out and you're like, okay, I gotta do something.
Do you remember what you did?
I didn't know the rules very well, and I believe I just made up on the spot some sort of a temple with wolves, and that's about all I can remember, other than I think someone thought it was a good idea to just jump down a hole that they were rappelling down, and ended up just kind of chain reaction dominoing the rest of the party down the hole.
See, so even in the first few moments, you just took it on and improv skills kicked in. Nice. Well done. That's really a funny story. That is a funny story. So, since you've been DMing for the last 9 years, is there a particular moment or moments that stick out to you as like some of your favorites in your GMing career?
I had to stop and think about that after I saw the other interviews. I think some of the earliest ones, definitely my first campaign, the one, no, it was probably the second one, because the first one didn't last more than a couple weeks of random improv. But it ended up being, I had no idea what I was doing, and I was dealing with people 3 years my senior at least, who knew the game a lot better than me and been playing for a lot longer, and I was getting having to learn all the very obscure splat books very quickly.
Sure, yeah.
And I remember they ended up taking down an entire dwarven vault. Just, I thought it was thematic to put them in a big pit of undead and bones kind of floating around.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't think that the party had a necromancer. I didn't think that through.
Nice.
So he just kept summoning and summoning and summoning while keeping themselves out of reach.
Nice.
And then just opened up into the bank and let them loose. And they ended up, I believe, building a spelljammer.
Oh, wow. This is back in the day. Sure.
Yeah, back. And I believe it was the most chaotic thing I've ever had to deal with, of just the sheer number of features on a spelljammer.
Nice. And how was that? From the point of view of the players, like, do you think they had a good time?
There was definitely, like, they were enjoying being able to just have complete creative freedom with what they built, because I hadn't figured out that you could just say, hey, yeah, you can't just buy something from nothing.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, I thought it was more like a video game where it's like, oh, there's a shop, you can just buy things if they're on the list.
Mm-hmm. And so why does that moment stick out to you as like one of the big moments for you?
It was just the gravity of, oh, my players now have a Mach 6 spaceship and I don't know how to handle that. And just the chaos of it. A lot of the moments that I think of are definitely more on the chaotic side.
Yeah.
And they definitely, just looking back, are always like, okay.
Yeah.
But they get a laugh.
Yeah. And so, but that's based on, but in the some respect, how different would that have moment been if you had said no? Would it have been better for it, or would it have been worse for it?
It depends. If I just said no, probably worse, because it just stonewalls there.
Mm-hmm.
But it definitely could have started off quest lines and going through and having them search out the parts they want instead of just buying them off a list.
Sure. There's always a way to improve, but I think like maybe your natural instinct, which I find really interesting, is to say yes. Like you want to say yes.
Especially in the beginning it was. Yeah. I've definitely changed it a bit because of events like that that get very chaotic.
Mm-hmm. So what's another moment that like is on that top list of fill in the GM?
I definitely have to say, back in 3.5, there were so many feats and abilities, and unlike in 5e where poison, it's usually just the poison trait, and that's where it ends. They had such varying uses. I still remember my players got hold of a poison called blue frog paste.
Okay, I'm not familiar with.
Don't know about it.
Yeah,
is I think a DC 14 if you touch it, or you're paralyzed for 1d4 minutes, or something along those lines. And the secondary effect is it also drains your dex for I think like a week. Like your dex goes down by a d4 for a week.
Yeah.
My players ran into a bunch of the blue frogs. I was using them just thematically. They had 2 alchemists who then just harvested all the poison they could.
Nice.
And 2 of them took a feat that makes them immune to the poison. So I had 2 people immune, basically playing mud wrestlers who would just slather themselves in blue frog paste and then just jump on anything that came near them.
That's amazing. That's actually hilarious. And how did that work out for the players?
It worked out pretty well for a while. That game has a lot of peak moments for me. Like, it definitely had a lot of fun moments like that. It didn't work on everything, because back in 3.5, there were so many things immune to poison. Like, they would just say, like, can't be paralyzed, can't be poisoned, poison does nothing. So it wasn't a catch-all, but it helped with anything that was human, anything that was a beast.
So that's a really funny. I'm picturing people in loincloths just rolling around in in basically a blue goop sort of situation and hugging other people. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So again, from the point of view of your new GM, you're presented with the situation of half-naked blue goopy people running around. So is your first inclination to just go with it, or do you try to pull back on it?
Well, I was okay with going with it, and I think it depends on the situation, but going with it is okay so long as there's limitations on it. Like, they only had so much blue fog paste. They didn't have an infinite supply.
Sure.
Only 2 people could use it, and it's a DC 14.
Right.
In 3.5, that's nothing.
Yeah, that's not
like a monster will have a fortitude, which is the old term for con save of like plus 12 by like level 5 or level 6. So it's irrelevant once it matters, but on small things it's fine.
Or the occasional nat 1 that might pop up and then like
yeah. But you know, a nat 1 nat 20 will always have a bit of a kiltering effect on the game.
That's really fun. Is there another? That's such a. I have such a clear visual in my head of what that looks like, and that's actually hilarious.
You were a bit bang on, because I think, what was it? My significant other, her first character was a rogue named Doug, who wore a potato sack on his head and a loincloth. Nice. He's a great sword and a whip.
Of course he did. Of course he did.
So it was a little spot on the loincloth there.
That's peak D&D, ladies and gentlemen. By the way, if anybody's like, oh, I don't know how to run a gritty, super serious game, doesn't have to be. Doug the Rogue can show up in his loincloth and potato sack and get her done. That's totally fine.
Yeah. I still, what was it? A lot. It's always like the interactions with people that have always gotten me. Like we had there's two that we still tease the people about them to this day, and like they're good natured about it. But we had one player, well, he was DMing at the time, not myself actually, but someone asked him, okay, like there's a parrot squawking at us. Is it a boy or a girl? It sparked a 20-minute argument on whether birds have gender.
Oh wow, nice.
Because he was misinterpreting birds have a cloaca as birds don't have a gender. So it's still a running joke of birds don't have gender. There's just no gender in birds.
That's it? No.
There's just bird.
It's just bird. That's right. And they don't want to be gendered. That's kind of funny. The do you find, like, in those moments, by the way, those crazy kooky like blue goop and other, moments that stick with you, is it the player that'll come back to you and say, you remember when Doug did this? Or do they say, do you remember when I did that?
It was definitely earlier in our gaming career, so it's only like recently, especially with Fifth, that we started actually getting into this character did this and more character oriented. Because in the older editions, it was hard to differentiate your character from your mechanics. There was so much just mental, I guess, burden with just, there was so many trap feats and trap abilities and so much to keep track of. It was so hard to get into that stuff, especially when you're just learning it.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons I love Fifth. It's so simple. They haven't bloated it
yet.
No, well, even their scaling is a lot better. You'd start the third and like you'd have like, well, new book, there's 25 new feats.
That's
and
true.
50 spells, and like I remember looking at D&D, not D&D wiki, D&D tools was the only way to build characters for the longest time.
Yeah.
So you'd sort feats and there's like, oh, I want feats about melee weapons. Oh, there's 350 of them.
Yeah.
And some of them are actively detrimental to your character.
And they're super obscure, and you're like, I'm not sure how this might play with that. And yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and then if you add in Dragon Magazine, you get into a whole other can of worms.
That's hilarious. So, from what you're describing, I mean, it sounds like you're saying you like to say yes, which is amazing. I think that's a huge strength of a DM. But from your point of view, so if I were to ask you what your greatest strength as a DM, what would you think?
I'd have to say, and I did similar to Dan from last week's. I asked my players. I wanted to know what their they thought, as well as my own. What they thought my greatest strengths were, which I'm pretty well in agreement, is world building. Like I was telling you when we were having our chat before, I have a wiki for a world I'm working on that's hundreds of pages and little things, and I just love having every little nitpicky detail of worlds down and like how things interact and how places go.
What's the name of the world that you're building, out of curiosity?
The world's name, just the campaign setting name is I'm calling it the Rhinelands, because it's a little valley within a mountain, and everything outside of this valley is just frozen over.
Oh wow.
So it's a very big valley, because a world wouldn't be interesting if it was like a normal valley, but it's just like a small little horseshoe-shaped area
and
in a mountain.
So what is it about world building that you find so exciting and fascinating that you spend so much time on it?
I really, really love just being able to set up characters, like how everyone jokes about, oh, I have like 600 characters on the back burner. They don't have to be on the back burner if you're DMing. If you're DMing, they're able to come out. You can have all these different people. You can get into the character of that shopkeeper, that random little gimmick character can come in, stuff like that. You don't need to worry about them lasting forever. Or you can make one that the party loves and wants to keep coming back to and working with and interacting with.
So when you play, let's say, I don't know if you play any video games, I'm assuming that maybe you spend a bit of time occasionally. When you play any game or a board game, do you get invested in the lore? Is that like a big part of it for you, to go and diving in, like reading every book in Skyrim or like opening every manual in World of Warcraft, what have you?
I love digging through lore wikis and lore stuff like that. Even if I don't play the game, I'll look up the wikis and just pour through them and just going through page after page of character interactions and how characters connect. And like, I'm not a huge fan of Warhammer as a game, but if you look through its lore, it's just so deep and so interesting. And same goes for just about any other game. Like, it's just interesting to see either the official lore or what people have assumed and kind of added up. It's the same way with like the D&D lore. I love looking at the really obscure little things.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so excited for the new Ravenloft book that's coming out.
So hang on, hang on. Before you go there, I want to ask a question. What is a really obscure D&D lore that is like tickles you pink that maybe most people don't know about?
There's definitely a few of them out there that I really find interesting. One with the Ravenloft.
Okay.
There's other dread domains other than Strahd.
Yes, for sure.
He's only one of many. And I think one of my favorites is a really obscure small one that's set in a Victorian era city like London.
Oh.
And the Dreadlord is like a Jack the Ripper with magic stand-in. Just seeing stuff like that, or just seeing really obscure things that are referenced in it, and like little tiny distant things like characters from Gygax's friends, or when you get into stuff like some of the really obscure planes and the rules and the areas and planes, like the Deep Ethereal is such a crazy place if you think about that.
Sure, yeah. Because most of the things that are described. So why don't you give us a quick 1-minute primer of the Deep Ethereal? That's not a thing that comes up a whole hell of a lot in any
I don't
game.
I don't think it's ever been mentioned in 5e in any of the books that I know of.
I mean, most ethereal spells presume that you're still sitting like on the very near the prime material plane. I don't think they necessarily talk about diving to the mists where you can get lost forever.
Yeah, because the Deep Ethereal is like the dream realm. Like the upper ethereal is where spirits go, and the Deep Ethereal is just, it's dreams. It's the collective thought of everyone in existence. It's where everything that everyone has, every nightmare, every dream, everything lives. And it's can be the best windfall ever if someone's dreaming about pots of gold, or you can run into a Cthulhian horror straight out of Lovecraft.
Yeah. It's actually a really interesting place, and I use it in a one-shot occasionally, and people are always super confused. What is this? What's the plane of dreams? Just, it's a really interesting place. Yeah, exactly. Whatever. Be careful what you think about, because you might manifest some really goofy stuff. So do you agree that then your greatest strength is the world building?
Yeah, especially when it comes to like adding backgrounds. Everyone who I asked, they were saying, I love tying people together. Like, I want the party to have connections, and I don't want everyone to just have their own little tiny plot line that each one just goes in sequence. I love having people, well, I'm looking for my father. Well, this person's thief contact has seen someone that looks like him, and just tying the players together and weaving all their stories together into one bigger overarching story. That's having people cool. Having the nice big reveal of like, oh, you've been looking for this. That's in my family's vault. Like, that's a very dangerous artifact that my family's been defending for years. Why are you looking for that? And nice. It kind of brings in that conflict and that connection between the players.
Has that happened where you have that moment where the player's like, "Oh, that's a thing that's related to me," and then is there that aha moment?
Yeah, I have. I've had that a few times in my current game. With one of my players was playing a dwarf noble who was exiled due to everything he had done, and another is a warlock of, I call them old gods, like they're just kind of primordials.
Sure.
That are locked up, and she's looking for keys, and he finds out, oh, my family has those keys locked up with 3 other families. Like we have a vault deep under the city.
Mm-hmm.
And he, through some story places with one of my favorite moments in the game of everyone made a deal with a hag.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a risky bet any day.
Sure.
He traded away his family's crest, but he was the heir to the family. So that has a big connotation.
Mm-hmm.
His family's exiled, the crest is gone, and suddenly now the hag has the crest and has the keys. And so it's linking things together, and everyone's trying to piece it together and trying to find out how all these little interactions have added up to a whole city basically being pulled into the ground and being torn asunder.
Based on your answer around the world building, so every time I have somebody on, we end up talking about D&D specifically, and then we bring in other conversations of role-playing games.
Yeah.
The standard assumption, and feel free to disagree with this, and this is kind of what I want to ask. There are the D&D calls it the 3 pillars of game, right? There's combat, there's roleplay, and then there's the exploration piece. Yeah. And by and large, it feels like, mechanically at least, D&D doesn't necessarily support the exploration piece very, very well. With your world building that you've provide with all these tying effects, do you find that this lore bit, this exploration, is more natural? Do you have an easier time with it with the style of DMing that you do than you would never normally see?
I honestly, I do find it's a bit better for exploration, having people having to actively look for things, having people needing to actually search through libraries and find things and do the investigation. Because it turns, if someone's having to investigate and look through a library, even a bad roll investigating turns into a method you can help with the exploration. You don't find the book you're looking for. You're not finding something on turning people into frogs.
Sure.
But you're finding old textbooks from a wizard who disappeared years ago and who you're discovering may be connected to your current plot line.
Sure.
It gives you a different avenue to go into if you've set up these little connections and weaved everything together.
Oh, that's
especially you're the DM. You know what's happened. Even if something random gets added in, you can weave that in as if it was intentional.
Nice.
No one's to know.
Yeah. So is that... So I talk about this concept sometimes of not writing yourself into a corner, right? And so when you have such a plethora, like 300 wiki pages, does that basically function as like breadcrumbs or permission for you to pull on some of these threads whenever you want without all of them necessarily being relevant? Like, how does that manifest itself in the gameplay?
I use... One of the biggest things I use it for is, I guess, kind of Sly Flourish style, the lazy GM. A lot of these wiki pages are things like NPCs, shops, people that they may not otherwise meet. But it's just, so if they suddenly go off to some random town and they're like, oh, I want to go to the potion shop, I have a list of 4 potion shops already made with their owner and everything, and I can just pluck that out and be like, okay, this is the shop you go into.
Right.
But it does definitely let you keep track of and have little links and little hyperlinks all over to like, well, this person knows this person knows that person. And it lets you do the breadcrumbs, and it also lets you pull things in if they've been missed.
Right.
Like, they may not realize, like, oh, yes, I know these people. Maybe go talk to them, and they may go talk to one and then go off with another quest.
Sure.
But then they come back like, oh, we didn't find anything. Okay, let me call my contact, and I'll bring him in. And you can bring in the people they may have missed manually through other NPCs and other ways, or them finding notes from those people.
Nice. And it, I mean, it sounds incredibly useful. I'm not sure what's lazy about it. I know Sly Flourish is like sort of presented, but like there's nothing lazy about what you're describing. It just allows you to not waste any preparation, essentially.
Exactly. You don't build a town with every little shop. You build dozens of shops and then can just modularly put them into a town they head into.
Perfect.
So you only need to build 4 shops for 3 towns instead of building 50 shops for those towns.
Right. In terms of when you start, I have other sets of questions, but I'm curious about this. When you start your world building, you start with a small area and grow from there, or are you actually building these nodules that are modular as intentionally? Like, how did you get started with Rhyme World?
The Rhinelands, I got started because, ironically, I've never played the game, but I love the concept behind Frostpunk. I always think of a concept for the world. Frostpunk, the game.
I've never heard of Frostpunk, no.
It's kind of a post-apocalyptic one where it's, think of like The Day After Tomorrow, the movie.
Yes.
Every temperature's dropping. And
you mean the documentary Day After Tomorrow?
But they end up having to it's kind of like steampunk Victorian, and they end up abandoning civilization and moving all around this one giant coal-fired generator that has to heat up this little crater they live in. It's
really
like
cool.
A city management concept where you're just having to feed the generator and manage all the policies to keep people alive and safe as the temperature continues to drop and drop.
And this is called Frostpunk?
Frostpunk, yeah.
And is that a video game?
Yeah, it's
interesting.
Definitely pretty popular. It's been out for years now, though, I think.
I have 2 young children that have consumed the last, 30 years of my life.
It's a time-consuming game from what I've seen.
That's cool. I'm gonna definitely look at that. That sounds really interesting. Sorry, so you based your some of your concepts around Frostpunk.
Yeah, of just having like this one little grotto in an area where everything outside of it is just frozen over, and if they get late game, they can start investigating and trying to seal this up. And it's just building, okay, well, you have this, and some magical cataclysm in the past caused this.
Mm-hmm.
So you have like a group that's like vehemently against mages. So they're just, no, I'm not going to, like, no one casts magic unless they're licensed by us, because we don't want someone tearing open the fabric again.
Sure.
And destroying what little we have left. And you have, I always take stuff like that, and I got off track.
No, it's fine. No, it's fine. I'll
take the concept and I'll start building little pieces onto it, and then once I have the little pieces, I'm like, okay, then I'll have like the countries, and I know the general theme, and it's small like 3 or 4
Give me one second, just because I don't want to cut your thought flow. We just lost, for whatever reason. This is not an official stream until something goes completely kablooey, and of course, the video feed has died. So let me see if I can salvage it here. Sure. Zoom is my favorite thing. I think we all know that at this point, that Zoom is just my favorite thing. Try again. Is it going to show up? Randomly dies. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Pyle. I can see the video randomly died. Dylan, give me a second. What I'm gonna do, because this is really interesting, and I want to keep hearing about it, and so does a bunch of our viewers. So while I restart the Zoom feed, I'm not gonna kill the stream. In fact, hang on. Maybe while I still have you on, because honestly, at this point, I'm kind of up to here with Zoom. What I can do is maybe we can use. I'm gonna plug Google Meets for a second and see if I can get that working.
While it's still live?
Yeah,
we're pulled on that.
We're gonna do that live, bro.
So I meant Google Meets. I thought it was plug was pulled on it.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's happening here. No, it's still Google Meets is still around, still a thing.
Okay.
So let me send you a link.
Oh, no, it was. Okay, go ahead. I have it open.
Okay. See if I can. All right, so I'm gonna kill Zoom. Yeah, we're doing it live, guys. All right, I'm gonna kill Zoom and I'll call you right back.
Sounds good.
Oh boy, ladies and gentlemen, this is some real life stuff right here. Now, you're gonna get to see my messy office, which is awesome. This is how we do. This is how we do it. Oh wait, I'm gonna get DMCA'd if I seen this. I don't want that. Okay, if I do this, oh boy, alright. Zoom, I legit just, at this point, big fan Is that me? That is me. Hey! I'm showing up. Look at this. Boom. Got him. I'm muted. Let me just make sure I bring Dylan back in here because he's the guest of honor. Oh. Uh-oh. That's fine. Nothing's working anymore, but we're gonna sort right through this. I am good, man. I'm trying. Mr. Ball, I'm trying. This is good. This is why our audience is here, to make fun of me. If I full screen this, boom. Oh, that's a lot of rack. That's a lot of rack. How about we do a lot less rack here? Admit. There we go. Hello. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Welcome. Oh, thank you for having me back.
Yeah, let me see if there's
I hear you fine.
Layout. Let's do. Can I do sidebar tiled? Oh, is that okay? Does that work if I do tiled? Change layout. Auto spotlight. No tiled. I have no clue. There we go. So good. So good. We got it. This is gonna have to do. So perfect. All right, we did it. So what we were talking about. Your volume's just a bit low. Do you want to change?
I've lost audio.
Oh. Can you hear me? Hello?
I hear you if I turn on the stream, but I can't hear you.
Through Google Meets, you can't hear me? Hello?
No, I'm not sure if that I don't have audio coming out of it.
I can hear you just fine. And can the stream, guys? Can you in the stream? Can you hear me? Yeah, the solving tech problems on the side, the struggles of an online DM. True. So let me chat. Are you in chat? Let's see. Yeah, you guys can hear me. Can we hear Dylan? Dylan, can we hear you?
Is that any better?
Yes.
I can't hear anything through the meet.
Really?
Like everything's delayed because I have to. Yeah, the meets is completely silent for me.
Is it silent? Oh. Okay, how about now?
Yeah, there it is.
Okay, perfect. Ooh, alright, we're back, ladies and gentlemen, kind of. And I'm gonna write a sternly worded letter to Zoom that they're gonna ignore because they have millions of users, who cares? So, Dylan, what we were talking about is the approach that you might have around world building. So you talked about the concept. So you started with the core concept of this, like Frostpunk sort of thing, where so you started small and built on it, or did you already have a grand idea of what the world would look like and then retrofitted it from there?
I definitely had like the grand idea of like the general shape, and I'll usually build like a map of the general shape and generally shape it and get an idea of what's where. And then I'll start building. I'll pick like an idea for the campaign, or at least a general idea or two, to start building off of it. And one of the best things I've found for just building your own world and building up something like that is I don't know if you've heard of it, duet games.
I have not.
It's the Essentials Kit for D&D talks about it a good chunk, but it's playing with just yourself and one other person, or yourself and it's basically a one-on-one game, and it lets you explore very quickly, and it lets you build out without having to deal with some of the stuff that'll bog down in a normal game, everyone wanting to go off in 7 directions. You're just following one character. Sorry, I bumped my mic.
That's okay.
You're just following one character through what they do. And it ends up being a very good tool for world building and just very interesting for just playing through something quick and easy and fun.
And this is, you called it duet games, right? D&D duet? Is that
what it's usually called? I know the Essentials Kit talks about it, and they have sidekick characters.
I'm gonna put it in chat just in case if this is the right resource. Maybe people can check it out. And think, by the way, your microphone's coming through your headset now, so you may want to lower.
Oh, that's what ended up happening here. I don't know how to use.
That's okay. Just bring the. We can hear you through the.
All right.
Ooh, Bring your volume a little bit down, but perfect.
Sorry
Nice.
about that.
That's
I'll
okay.
get the Yeti out of my face then.
All right, and hopefully it's not too loud. We're doing it live, boys. Follow-up question. So that's world building is always a big issue for me. I know we have a guest or we have a viewer in our chat, Mr. Bile. He's got a Twitch channel that I've been checking out, and literally what he does I'm gonna plug him right here. I'll do it here, and it's Mr. _Bile. So the shout out didn't work, but you can find him at twitch.tv slash Mr. _Bile, and he does on Mondays, Wednesdays, and I think Fridays. He does these great streams of world building, which I find fascinating because it's not like a huge skill set of mine. So if I wanted to get started, Dylan, I want to start my world building, and I have an idea. Here, let's do it live because that's what this show's about. I have this idea of a world that is where water has gone, let's think Dark Sun kind of thing. The world is very short on water, but I don't necessarily want to go Mad Max Dark Sun with it. Where is a thing that I can start thinking about? What space can I start thinking about to get myself started?
Well, in that sort of world, you can. One of the biggest things too for worlds that I always try is you have to limit your scope. Okay. I've tried so many times in the past to do an entire globe, and it's so hard to get down everything that's happening in just this huge area. So, like the Rhinelands, it's a large mountain valley. It's It's hundreds of miles across, but it's all encapsulated by mountains. Everything outside is inhospitable. You've limited your scope. With a world like what you said, with all the sand and very little water, well, you need water to survive. You can't travel super far without water. So, water sources are your limit. You have your oases in the middle, your water sources scattered around in the center. Well, now there's a limit to how far people can go out. You've limited your map, you've limited your scope. You don't need to look at the entire world. You just need to look at where the water is.
Nice, that's a good tip.
Because no one's going to fight for an open stretch of sand that goes on forever. But they're going to fight over that oasis.
So you would begin looking at like points of interest, and how do we build around that?
Exactly, and like the major resources like water, lumber, things like construction materials, food, water are the things everyone's going to need. So everyone's going to be kind of vying for the nice grassy areas, if there is even any.
We can't, we're the DM, we can do whatever the hell we want. There could be one grassy. So do you look at like do you lean anything on like historical, factual things that you pull from in your games to try to give it this sense of verisimilitude?
I try, but I don't go too deep into it. You have magic. A druid can come, spend a few days, and double your crop harvest. So I'm not going to go super deep into that and super deep into all these little supply lines, but I will look into stuff of like special resources, things that people might actually fight over. So space can be an issue, and things with like in my world, lumber isn't too bad. It's all forests. So people fight over metal because it gets dangerous to go digging through the mountains because you poke out on the wrong side and suddenly you've got a blizzard freezing all your miners.
Right.
So there's very little ore and metal. Magic is super heavily policed, so you don't have to worry about magic items. Like those are something people fight over. And sources of those, like something like dungeons, like where do dungeons come from? Are they old? Are they magic?
So all that like that brain processing that you're using, like you've just described 30 possible plot lines in about 30 seconds, right? Because you've created basically you've created 30 plot hooks, if not more, with possible tangents that go all over the place. So for a new DM who comes in who hears you talk about this, you just give me a sentence, like literally a paragraph. If I were to transcribe this, it's like 4 sentences, and there's a plethora of options here. Now, do you stop there and start mining these for ideas, or do you create these situations and then if the players happen to go there, like how deep do you do the minutia of an encounter, or do you just generally prepare this could be happening and just keep that in mind?
I do keep it in mind, and it'll especially play into buying and selling prices, stuff like that. Especially with like resources. It may play into find in a lot of games. Houses are cheap. like if you think in D&D, a house should be cheap for a player. So if they want to buy into a town, it shouldn't be that difficult, especially unless there's something special about it, like unless space is an issue.
Why do you think houses should be cheap?
Well, how else would, say, a farmer live? Like, you could probably, like, if you think a bushel of wheat is worth like copper in D&D.
Mm-hmm.
So a farmer with the excess to sell, he's making what? Per harvest season, he'll make a couple gold pieces. If he's paying his rent or owning his own house, a player character, like a PC, even by like 3rd level, 4th level, they're recommended to have thousands of gold, like into like the lower thousands. So if they need to buy just a small home, an apartment, or something in a city, that shouldn't be too expensive. It gives them stake in your places is the biggest thing. Because a PC, they're gonna walk around, buy beer, buy food, buy a weapon or two, and leave town. They won't really care about the price of iron.
Sure.
But if they buy a house and suddenly bread prices are going up, it's affecting the people in their community, like in their character's community. They're more dedicated to that, and like it sets an anchor point.
So
and gives them a sink for the money, because I know in D&D money will build and build with nowhere to go.
Fair enough. So in terms of, that's very true. That's a good point, actually. When that's I can ask. I want to follow up on that little thread there in a second. Building your player's investment into a location, a fictional location, what does that do in your mind for player engagement? Like, why is that so important?
I find it important, especially if you're building like dedicated, like a city or a country that they have to be, that it behooves them to be good with. It's definitely something that is good to build investment, and they will feel a connection to their neighbors. If every time they're leaving their house for an adventure, little old lady next door gives them a little basket of breads, well, they don't want the little old lady freezing. They don't want the little old lady running out of bread to give them. Like, it's just sweet little role-playing moments and little things with the locals that you can do where they don't just think, oh, we're just walking by, like, hey, goodbye.
Right.
It's someone they'll see every day before they go to adventure. It'll someone that'll be there to greet them when they come home. It gives them someone to actually talk to and build a relationship with, even if they're not that major.
So as a generally evil, jerk DM that I am, it also gives me an NPC that I can target now to do bad things to make the players angry. Anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. If you want to be the devil himself, you can.
Yeah. That poor old lady, what happened to her? Nobody knows. Do you have, so skipping to the next question, Dylan, in terms of house rules, is that a thing that you have at home or in your games that you bring in? And if you do, what is their purpose?
There's a good few that we bring in. One that I've been working on that isn't really in my games is, I love the feats, but I don't like that you have to pick between like advancing your character as they grow with the
ASIs
and the feats.
Mm-hmm.
So I like I'm working on like a system for training feats. Like, you find someone, and again, it gets them invested in NPCs when they have to seek out a wizard who knows this feat and has these great feats of magic that they can train with to learn the feat. Like, say, spell sniper, if they want to be able to do that,
yeah,
they can seek out this wizard and do, like, it'll be rolls and challenges and like role playing back and forth. That can be really fun for building up the feats and building up their players' knowledge without making them choose between a feat and an ASI.
Nice. That's also a great money sink, by the way. Good money sink.
Yes, it is. That's definitely it. One of the reasons too is like, now you can put money into paying for a teacher if you want, like just paying a great swordsman to come and show you how to
parry
properly parry.
Sure,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. One of the big ones that we do hasn't come up much in my game because my players are tanky. I do death saves at the start of your turn, not at the end.
Okay. I thought
because it is at the end.
The death save? I thought that if you rolled a nat 20, I might be wrong
you
here.
You get up and your turn ends.
I thought you got up and... Is it?
No, your turn ends. Like, that's the end of your turn.
Oh, I thought
I'm pretty sure.
Oh, it's okay. I believe you. I'm gonna look it up just because I remember having that conversation and getting yelled at by a player. Yelled at is a strong word. Sternly talked to. But I was pretty sure it was at the beginning. But anyway, if it's not, then your rule definitely fixed.
No, I guess it is. It is at the start of your turn. I thought it was at the end. I've seen so many things with people upset that your turn would end or something. I guess I was wrong.
No, it's totally.
So I guess it's not.
And here's the thing: you thought it was a bad rule, and you fixed it, and in fact, you fixed it to where it is, which means to me that you're a very solid designer because you found an issue, you fixed it to a place that they probably equally did it done with WotC, right? They're probably like, oh, death saves should happen at the end, and like somebody probably said that doesn't feel good because I missed out my whole turn. You pinpointed the same issue, and you think that's amazing. Well done, actually. That's very well done.
Another one that we do. This one is more just for fun. Exploding criticals. That's an old alternate rule from the older editions. 3.5, I think, was one of the first to bring that in.
I don't think I'm familiar. Oops! Oh, I just broke my camera. I don't think I'm familiar with exploding criticals. Why don't you?
It is when you roll a 20, you re-roll the attack afterwards. It's similar to like confirming a crit from the old editions.
Sure, yeah.
Just an awful feeling. You roll bad and you don't crit, even though you got a 20. But if you roll another 20, it doubles the crit. And then you roll again, and if it's another 20, it can go on.
Oh my gosh.
It's like, mathematically, we've had, I think, 2 happen the whole campaign. But it's such a blissful feeling to just one swing and suddenly 150 damage from like a tripled crit or like a sextupled crit comes out.
Nice. Does it apply to the bad guys too?
It does. I have yet to use any of it because we have a grave cleric who constantly
nice. That's not a crit. No crit for you, yeah.
Yeah, so I think I've crit like a total of 3 times the whole campaign because of her.
Nice.
But one that is an odd one. It is definitely one that people will argue back and forth with. Maximum 2 people per skill check.
Oh.
So the party can choose who does them.
Yeah.
But only 2 people. Like if you're doing a knowledge history, only 2 characters can do it. If you're doing an insight, 2 characters. And that's because Matt Colville talks about it. Skill dogpiling. If you have, my current party is 6 people. If everyone tries to make a history check, someone's going to get at least above a 15.
Right.
Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts with the math on that. A lot of people are going to get something high eventually.
Yeah.
So it stops people dogpiling onto skills and having things like the barbarian knows this spell, but the wizard doesn't.
Right. I actually don't... I know who Matt Colville is. I haven't had a chance to actually go through his site or... I think he does the videos, right? Like,
he does YouTube, the Running the Game series. He also has 2 books out now.
Oh, nice.
Which are, one of the big money sink things, Strongholds and Followers, is all about like buying and building your own Wizard's Tower or Knight's Castle.
And he has a book on that?
Yeah, he released them on Kickstarter, and then he's got Kingdoms and Warfare, which is like running kingdoms for players.
So anybody in chat who's not familiar with Matt Colville, check him out on YouTube. I don't think he needs my shout out, but
no,
by all means, check it out.
Long-time game designer.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, the concept of skill dogpiling, that's a great term for it. Absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I usually do the thing where if you're proficient in it, you get to roll. One of you can roll or both of you can roll, and then if one of you helps the other, you just get advantage. And that's it.
Yeah. I'll usually do something similar to that. Like, okay, 2 people can roll, or you can help the person with the higher one. It'll just be 2 people are the ones mainly interacting.
Yeah.
And the biggest reason I didn't do proficient is there's so many skills that people aren't proficient in. Like, it's so rare to have someone with knowledge history. Like, I'll have maybe 1 in the party who has it. And then if you say only proficient, 1 person gets to roll.
Yeah.
And you'll have people might want to just give a hand or something.
Sure. Sorry, the other homebrew rule you had just before the skill thing, what was it? Remind me again, because I had a question about it.
Oh, the exploding criticals.
Yeah, the
roll a 20 and 20 and...
Yeah, so the criticals, as written in the book, it's just like you roll a nat 20 and you get double the dice, right?
Yeah.
How often has it happened in your game? And from a player point of view, it doesn't feel good when I roll, let's say I have a great sword, it's what, 2d6? Now it's 4d6, and I'm still just... There's a very high chance that my crit does less damage than a regular attack.
Right? Yeah, that's not the greatest feeling. With the exploding ones, I use an app called Foundry instead of Roll20 for my... Okay, perfect. Yeah. Then you'd know. I can just right-click and hit double damage. So it doubles... With the exploding crit, I'm fine with doubling the modifier. Like, it's such a rare thing. Oh no, an extra 5 damage on a once in 2,000 rolls sort of event. So I will double the modifier to make sure like they're hitting like a truck.
Yeah. Has that led to any cool moments when you say that one player like has landed that?
We had our party's paladin, level 9 paladin with Shield of Faith and haste and a magic sword.
Nice. That sounds painful already. That sounds painful. I'm sensing a divine smite coming here.
Yeah, he didn't explode, but he landed 2 crits and a hit on an iron golem in one turn and took it from 200 hit points to like 60 hit points in one turn.
Nice.
By just pouring all of his smites into it.
That's what paladins can do.
And I had one of the villains that had been messing with them and had, again, like, destroyed a friend of theirs. Their bar had been washed away by this villain, and they were tracking him back and forth and going after the reward the friend of theirs had put up for him. And they finally found him, and he had hired a bunch of pirates to take him across the sea to run away. Because my current campaign isn't in the Rhinelands, it's in another world.
It's okay.
But he's running away across the world. They catch up finally. They got on the boat. The rogue, who's the captain of the player's ship, has this big back and forth with the pirate captain. And then the dwarf fighter hops up, one swing, exploding crits on the villain.
Oh, nice.
And he was a warlock. He dealt like 80 damage in a swing and just bunk, he's gone. And just the captain's like, I have no one to defend. I'm not being paid anymore. Have a good day, I guess. Yeah. They just one round and the whole encounter was over, and they just kind of dragged him away to go take the reward. And the whole fight that was built up just ended.
I love that. I actually love that. Do you have a moment? So what that tells me is oftentimes the DM, you'll set up this big bad, BBEG, big bad evil guy, who's like taunting the players, I'm gonna get you, and there's a back and forth, and finally you arrive at the moment, and the players either trounce the bad guy or outthink you because there are 5 of them or 6 or 4 of them, and there's one of you. I often tell them, you're not the smartest. So you're not the smartest player at the table. You can't be when there's that many. So when that sort of thing happens, do you go with it, or do you just suddenly, oh, he has like extra 50 hit points, or do you just like what is your reaction?
Well, for me, I'm willing to go with it. I let the dice lie where they roll, unless it's something that's just terrible for the story. Like my last session, I actually had a TPK last session.
Oh.
The party at level 9 went in. Their only prep was buying 4 resistance to poison potions, and they went into the lair of an adult green dragon with a cult behind him.
Nice.
And everyone went down. I was aware this wasn't prepped well enough for, so I did have something in place, so the game didn't just end there.
Right.
But if they don't prep enough and whatever they're going against trounces them, that's gonna happen. And at the same time, if I mess up or the villain makes a mistake or they just get really lucky on the dice, the villain goes down. I'm not going to fudge that on them.
Yeah.
Especially when it's like an exploding crit like that, I don't have a big qualm about it because
that's what it's there for, literally.
Yeah. And if the villain is able to just take one swing and is in a position where like they can just attack with no consequences, then I'm gonna let the dice lie, because like a big thing is if you have a villain who's publicly backed and lots of people are willing to sit down and help him, and he's a public figure, they can't just go in and go in swinging.
Right.
So he's got the diplomatic immunity. But if he's just, for lack of a better term, a chuckle fuck, and is just there to be trounced, and he is just in the open with no escape, that's where he lies.
That's a very common villain that I bring into my game, Mr. Chucklefuck, and he gets often rolled. Where what you're talking about with the green dragon. So I have a video somewhere in the ether, the YouTube, or I don't know where it is, where I talk about the concept of fairness and player agency. Yeah. This is the example that I give, and I'd like to hear what you have to think, what you think about it. There's a difference. Let's say I'm a rogue again. Let's use that example, and I've been tasked by the local guild, the Assassin's Guild, to break into the home of a paranoid artificer to retrieve some blueprints that are critical to like the war efforts, right? And then said player goes to that mansion, breaks into the top window, and suddenly the alarms go off, and you're into a situation. Okay. Versus, I'm the same rogue walking down the streets of Waterdeep, and suddenly out of nowhere, 8 beholders jump out and start shooting disintegration rays at me. Right? There's a very clear distinction in these two events, and one allows for player agency and decision making, and one is just the DM that's generally being a bit of a needle dick. So where in these two, like, you don't want to be a dill hole about it. So player agency is important. So in your example of the green dragon, I'm not saying one way or the other, but did they have enough time to prepare? Was it well informed? Or if it wasn't, then did you then feel the need to, okay, they just knocks you out and takes you prisoner kind of situation?
For the way it went in my game, there was 5 sessions leading up to it of them doing other things and making preparations and just asking around. Mm-hmm. They were told many times by other people, because the reason they went was to get access to like a restricted library for a wizard school.
Sure.
The Archmage wanted to build a scrying orb, so he wanted a dragon eye to do that. And instead of going, they were already given access to the City of Brass, where they could go and buy anything they needed, anything they wanted. Mm-hmm. Instead of buying it there or searching out a market where they could buy it, they were like, nah, we'll just go kill a dragon and pull it from them ourselves.
Easy peasy, like you do.
And yeah, and even the Archmage just kind of looked at them and went, that's a lot harder than you're needing it to be, but okay.
Yeah.
And it was like different people like, that's going to be hard. That's challenging. And you have to foreshadow if it's something they can't keep up with, and if it's going to be something they can't just walk in and trounce. Mm-hmm. You need to foreshadow that.
Yeah.
Because I'm all for not everything. The world isn't there to cater to them. Yep. There are things there that they can't fight. But you can't just have a Tarrasque crawl out of the ground in the city and eat the rogue just because. Like,
I mean, unless the rogue like didn't bring the Arby's fries that you asked for, and then like, okay, fine.
But yeah, but there's your foreshadowing. He didn't bring the fries. You know what he got into.
He did it to himself. Let's be clear. Yeah.
You need to have the foreshadowing, because if you don't foreshadow what's going to happen, it's just hitting someone over the back of the head with a hammer. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just, you just pop up, hit them, and you're gone. And like, there's no buy into that. With this, there were multiple sessions. They went onto the island, scouted it, found out there was a cult and a village built up around the dragon. Then they ran from the dragon outside of his lair back to the ship to go figure some stuff out. And then they went back in, and they went through multiple, because it's a green dragon. It's the smart, cunning dickhead of a dragon. Mm-hmm. And what he would do is, I built him around kind of chameleons because he was in the jungle.
Sure, that's a clever concept.
And so he would room where he had and some of his minions waiting, and he just hit them with a breath attack and then leave. Mm-hmm. Because he's like, okay, they're hurt. My minions will take care of it. Bye. And he'll take off. And this happened 3 times, and they continued to just follow him down whatever hallway he went down. And didn't back out, didn't try to leave. And it's that sort of, he didn't just pounce on you in the forest and take you down.
Right.
You followed him room for room through his lair as he hit and run you over and over again.
He's pretty clever. That dragon is pretty smart, and you guys are just kind of, So was it DM Mercy then that kicked in and said, all right, I guess we'll just, make you trap prisoners? Because it sounds like pretty deserved what happened.
Well, I didn't do prisoners. I did there was foreshadowing that the island had something to do with Fae on it. And the reason they originally ran from the dragon was they found a weird giant obelisk in the jungle.
Oh, lost the sound for a second there.
Sorry. Out of the chaos that all players have within them, the paladin decided just break the runes on the obelisk. So for this, it was the Fae. The Fae's archfae sealed behind these things, and this was his island. He was sealed away, and a dragon came and took over his little grotto. And so they've now opened him up. So now dragon kills them, thinks they're dead. The Fae has kind of pulled them in and is going to give them their second chance with penalties.
Sure. Strings attached, as it is wont to be with the Fae. So we've talked about, I find that DMs are very bad about talking about their strengths, because I think we tend to be overly critical, but this next question usually gets a plethora of answers. What is an aspect of you DMing that you think you want to improve on, that you feel you need to improve
on? One thing, I put this to my players as well as to myself. It was a little of a gut punch for my players to some degree, because everyone was unanimous.
Okay.
I put too many minions under my monsters. Because especially like that dragon fight, I was expecting them to peel off the cult. I was expecting to whittle it down. But they just kind of marched in headlong. So there was a lot of the paladin these people in one hit. An AoE could have dropped half of these people. But they focused on the dragon for too long, and it bogged it down with all. There was like 10 scouts and 4 mages. A single AoE would have killed any of these people. Like one blast and they're gone, even making the save. But they ended up staying, and it was combat's bogged down and get samey when there's so many minions and so many little characters.
Sure.
I was trying, I guess, too hard to compete with my players, which is a bit of a bad habit I have from the older editions, where it's very gamey and it is very hard to keep up. And it's just trying to balance it out between, I have 6 players, so even CR doesn't work very well to begin with. When you have 150% of a party, I'm trying to keep up with the action economy, but I'll have even like a big monster like an iron golem with like a couple things helping it got shredded by my party. A CR 16 and a CR 12 shield guardian went down in like 4 or 5 rounds to 6 9th level players. It's
hard.
I got into trying to keep up with them, and I'm realizing I need to use other things, and I might start trying to improve it by leaning on Matt Colville's stuff again with action-oriented monsters.
Okay. I'm not super familiar with what I do for my. So as an example, so in terms of strength, it sounds like combat. A little bit of combat design might be where you think you need to improve.
Oh, for sure. As well as that's what my players said. For myself, I definitely feel I need to get better with notes, like taking them after sessions, and it's very hard to keep up with them, especially during a session with 4, 5, 6 people going at once. It's hard to keep a note of what's happening, and especially with small NPCs, like just one-off ones that it's by chance end up starting to come back and back and back. I've had characters change their name 2 or 3 times throughout the game.
Yeah.
Or change a voice and forget about voices, and just keeping notes of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's definitely keeping notes of that and not forgetting things. Like if someone sends a letter off to their family, remembering to get that letter back to them. Because it's just little things that they mention offhand that then just kind of slips my mind between sessions.
Yeah, that's fair. And it's a fine juggling act, right? It's not easy. It is not easy. I struggle with the same things. With combat right now, I'll tell you, I have 5 level 16 players. And so at that level range, I had created a sheet that I'll put in the YouTube doohickey. I've linked a couple times, which basically shows the available range of creatures within each CR from quarter, I think, or 1/8 maybe the small. I can't remember. All the way through 30, right, which is the highest challenge rating that the game offers. And I talk about And I talk about how challenge rating like is utterly starts being really useless at that point. And instead, I bossify monsters. I add legendary actions or legendary resistances, and I take the approach of building staged fights. So recently, they played. Those same players were fighting against Ogremok, essentially the one of the princes of the elements, and I made it into like a, you know, MMO almost type like stage one. This happens when they hit this threshold. This thing happens, and it evolves. The terrain evolves with it. And instead of being bogged down on like the actual hit points totals, it's more around like where are they at in the fight. Because otherwise, you know, if you try to compete with the action economy, yeah, the fight gets either super bogged down because everybody has an action, reaction, bonus action, and you're like, you know, plus spell effects that act almost independently like another creature. Plus, like they have summons. Maybe I don't know if you have a druid or like a necromancer in your party.
We don't. Our warlock has a familiar that stores a spell, but that's about it.
Yeah, so my party has both a necromancer and a druid. So they're constantly summoning stuff that just shows up. So you have it's a very difficult. I can see from your point of view and their point of view, it's a very hard thing to do in 5e. Because it can be overwhelming. It can be very much overwhelming. So I feel your pain there in both sections for sure.
Oh yeah, and I definitely need to get better. And like, your stuff sounds very, very similar to what Matt Colville does with the action-oriented monsters, where it's they get bonus actions and they get what he calls villain actions, which are just like a lesser form of legendary. And it's just adding up to being a creature who can do a bit extra, but not being quite legendary.
Yeah, it's basically like I give them multiple. They get multiple initiatives. Essentially, is what it amounts to in a fight. So it's more dynamic and it feels like better. It feels like reactive. It's not perfect, and I'm sure if you were to pull my players, which I often do, they're like, all right, whatever. I'm like, thanks, guys. I'll take that to heart. It was whatever.
Yeah, and definitely, I think one of the things that could like the way I do my combats too, unlike the staged, my players can't see their hit points, but they can see like the percentages. Like there's a on Foundry like the sliding bar, and they can mouse over and see like injured, uninjured, very injured, and it scales from green to red as they get closer.
Cool.
And they can see the damage dealt or healed, so I can't really fudge that at all either. Because like there's a module on there that I'm using that has the number of damage or healing pop up next to a creature.
Oh, nice. I
So
didn't know that.
if I heal them for 20 hit points, a big little bonk pops up that just shows like 20 hit points up.
Oh, you'll have to tell me what that module is. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of like the old Final Fantasy style. Like the number kind of just blips up on the token.
Yeah. Shout out to Final Fantasy because they need it. Square Enix. I know you guys don't have enough players. Nobody's ever. Oh, you're back. You're here. I see you.
Okay, I saw the stream start loading for a sec.
So let's revisit your youth 9 years ago. You're in 10th grade. What is something in that first session when somebody pushed the books to you? Pathfinder was at 3.5, and they said, Dylan, you're DMing. What is something that you wish you'd known when you first started DMing? What is a thing that you wish
this was something I definitely thought on for a while. There's two big things. The first one is you don't need to know everything, be it rules or world building. You don't need to have the encyclopedia of knowledge there. Your players encourage them to learn their own things, so you're not having to manage their characters for them. Encourage, just know, like, have a little note of the stat block. You don't need to memorize the stat block. You can miss things. You can make mistakes on the stat block. Whatever makes for a better game. And you sitting there staring at the book all day will make for a worse game than if you just made a ruling and said, okay, we'll do it this way. And I'll always say with my players, I don't want to stop the game for a rules argument. I'll say, okay, we're going to do it this way now, but we'll look it up after the session. Like after the session, we'll look it up and we can in the future run it that way. It's definitely, don't worry about stopping to argue about rules. Don't worry about stopping to make sure everyone's following the rules to a T. It's about the fun of the game, not about following the rules, and you don't need to think of it as like a competitive game where that rule matters, because it's telling a story more than it is how many goblins you cut down.
So I'm going to repeat that for the people in the back of chat or anybody else who ever might see this. If you're having fun at the table and your players are having fun at the table, you're doing it right. Nobody cares if you get the rules perfectly correct, as long as everybody has having a good time. Go ahead, Dylan. Please, I didn't mean to jump on my soapbox. Go ahead.
That's perfectly fine. And same with world building. My first worlds that I built, I would try and do that town where I would have every little building and every person and everything built and every little trade route mapped out. And then I realized no one's going to sit there and stare at every little minute thing. If they start digging into it and asking about it, you can write it. But you don't need to have every townsperson in every town within 100 miles of where your players start. Build a couple of towns and slot them in where the players go under different names. So you don't need to have everything built all at once. You're not trying to take this huge wide scope that you can't even fathom without being a team of 30 wizards designers over the course of 45 years to cover.
And that's fair. Unless you're writing the next D&D setting book that you're looking to sell, you probably don't need to have every little thing enumerated. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah, and even if you look at the setting books, like Curse of Strahd, you look at that, how many random farmers on the side of the road do they talk about? How many straight up just a random bread seller on the side of the street? They don't tell you his life story. You don't need to have every little detail about every little person written out.
They have a few locations that are like even Old Barovia that you stumble in. Spoiler alert if you haven't run Curse of Strahd, any viewers, and you want to. But it does tend to start in the Death House if you read part of the book. And then in Old Barovia, it's pretty sparse. There's like 3 or 4 buildings that they kind of talk about. There's Arena and what's his face, her brother. And there's not much else going on in that town.
Yeah, and these are professional game designers where there's like, they have like 10 writers on that book, all taking hours of their day full-time work to do this. And even they don't do like super, super in-depth detail of every little person. So one person as a hobby at home trying to do that is just obscene.
As a follow-up to the point that you made about the rules, can you think, and if so, how many, can you think of any session in your 9-year career as a DM, GM, that you run that went perfectly from your point of view, where you made no mistakes?
I'd say the one I think that went the best in that way was one of the earlier ones in my current campaign, just thinking back, where the party, they finished up fighting a group of harpies, the leader of the harpies ran off, and they managed to escape the area they were in, and they went to visit the hag that they made a deal with. And I loved the way I did the ominous nature of coming up on this giant sea turtle carrying a hut.
That's cool.
And going in and meeting like a small kind of nomadic looking girl sitting on the side who invited them in, and the blind old woman who sat around the table. And then COVID helped with this in that in the weirdest way.
Sentences you don't hear very often for 100.
Yeah, in that I wasn't sitting around the table with people. I was on Discord for the chat, and I could just bring people into a side chat where it was just me and them, and they'd go in and they'd discuss with the hag and make their deal, trade for a magic item or whatever information they wanted, and just these cryptic deals that they had built up. And each person at the end signed a contract in blood.
Nice.
This is the agreement. You're not going to talk to anyone else about it. So even now, despite characters rotating in and out, no one knows exactly what everyone promised.
By the way, I'd like to point out that writing contracts in blood doesn't happen nearly enough in real life. I've never gone to like a mortgage broker, my bank, I don't. It's not a thing. I'm super surprised with how often it comes up in D&D. Growing up, I thought for sure contracts are signed in blood. For sure, hasn't happened once. Not once.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's it would be a little odder to walk into a bank and see a big cup of, instead of pens, it's a bunch of needles. Would definitely be a bit of an odd feeling.
I mean, why not? But I'd like to point out one thing, again, for new DMs and GMs out there who might stumble on this one day. Dylan has 9 years experience, and he can think of literally one session where he thinks everything went right. Right? Or at least he has one moment in there that he felt went really well.
Yeah, there's definitely like some that went okay, but it's always definitely been it's the little moments. Like there'll always be hiccups in games, and it's just the little moments that stick with you. You don't remember the sessions where everything went wrong, but you'll remember the fun moments in them. Like I still remember a character who we still tease and kind of make jokes about. He went up and he was a rogue going to talk to a bunch of pirates to try and get passage on a ship. And I had to stop to clarify after because he walked up and said, "Hey guys, it's been so long. I'm looking for some good company. You guys looking for a good time?" And I had to stop and clarify that he's not trying to instigate a nautical orgy here.
Yeah.
And it turns out he wasn't. He was just trying to smooth into some conversation, and I had to stop, and we still tease him about it.
Hey guys, yeah, that sounds amazing.
Hey sailors!
Hey
As he
sailors!
just walks up, and it's just like, you're not trying
at once, already.
Nice.
and double check, and that's the thing that sticks with me. Not like the little mistakes and like the little arguments that break out at the table, and those are the things you should hold on to.
So again, new GMs, DMs out there, the odds of you running a perfect session are near zero. They're so infinitesimal. I've been GMing since 1995. I have, we'll say, a few years on Dylan, not many more, just a few. And I can honestly think of exactly 0 sessions that I would consider that I run perfectly, where I didn't make any amount of mistakes with either a rule, a decision, and still, somehow, despite all of my imperfections, the players are coming back and having fun. So don't focus on being perfect. Even, Matt Colville, who's been called a few times, or the other DMs that have games on Twitch with thousands of viewers, make mistakes. And that's okay. And that's totally okay.
Yeah.
Dylan, I will ask one final question, and then we'll ask you for a hook for a one-shot Monday. This is a new question.
I do have one other part. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No, go for it. No, go for it.
For things I wish I first knew.
Yeah.
It's a little ironic with what we started with. You do need to learn when to say no. It is good to say yes to your players, but like, I don't think I'd want to run another game where my players have this giant flying adamantine airship that causes panic everywhere it flies.
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard, and you need to, especially when people come to the table with a build and not a character, when they come with, oh, I'm going to do this huge thing and all these broken rules, you do need to be able to say, like, well, does that fit with the game? Is this going to be fun for other people, or is this going to stick?
Mm-hmm.
You have to, you don't have to just say no and end the conversation, but you don't have to just approve everything. You need to have some semblance of control of the game so that everyone has a fair shot at it.
That's very true. I'm gonna quote the great Verity here, who on I don't remember when I interviewed her, but it went. The big thing she said is everybody at the table is responsible for everybody else's fun, right? That's a big thing, and so by being able to kind of limit the scope, or at least give everybody a chance to shine, or make it a reasonable game where everybody can get to play, it can be important to learn to say no. It's not a fun thing to do, mind you, but sometimes it's very necessary. So, very good tip. That's a very good tip. Dylan. Anything else?
No, that was it.
Those are great.
Feel free with your last question.
Okay, I haven't asked this yet. I'm gonna try it out on you. You're my guinea pig. Who is a famous person, or what famous person, alive or dead, whether it be an actor, politician, comedian, author, scientist, whatever, that you would think would be an amazing DM and whose table you'd like to sit at?
Oh, well, I already know he knows what he's doing to some degree, and I know his stories are some of my favorites when it comes to writing. I'd have to say Patrick Rothfuss is definitely one of the people I would love to be in a game and see how he would run things and how he does things. So still waiting on that last book, but
is that from a point of view of the storytelling, the world building, the role play interactions, all of the above?
All of them, yeah. Like his world is so interesting to see how it's fleshed out, and he seems to have put so much thought into even the small details and how people interact and how people are treated. and it's just such an interesting thing. Not to mention, he is just well known. Like, he even writes his own inspiration was playing D&D growing up.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
So it's just such a fun looking world.
So that's if I'm not mistaken, it's the Name of the Wind and that series, right?
Yeah.
I forget I forget the actual name of the series. The Wise Man's
Kingkiller Chronicles.
Kingkiller Chronicles. There we go. Yeah, book 3. Anyway, I don't think we're allowed to say book 3 aloud anymore without getting into some kind of trouble.
It pushes it back a year every time you mention it.
Yeah. And the poor, I mean, he's under a lot of strain, I imagine, with constant pestering. But that's a really good answer. That's a very good answer. I think I might join you in that game. If it ever so happens to happen. Well, Dylan, do you have, before we move on, do you have any questions for me or any shout outs that you want to give out? Anything that's on your mind that you want to speak to that I didn't get to ask?
Nothing that comes to mind, really. Definitely for tools, one that's little known, not heavily advertised and all over the place is its competitor. Legend Keeper for world building is just beautiful.
Legend Keeper.
It's a lot more custom than World Anvil, the one that it kind of competes with. And it's just very open-ended and very, very nice for world building and all the pins and building up things how you want. It's still currently in development, and I've been backing it and following it since it launched.
Nice. So I put that in chat for anyone who wants to check it out. We're not sponsored in any way, shape, or form by anybody. So this is really from Dylan's heart, and it looked. I'd not heard of it, and I took a look at it. And it looks really interesting. It looks very complete, and that's where you have your Rhyme World.
Yeah, the current world I'm building, I have that in there, and it makes it so easy to be able to link things and connect them, and just like tagging systems, so you can tag like how I keep a stock of shops ready to go and slot in. I can just tag shop unplaced and just type in the tags unplaced, and it brings up a list of all the things tagged with unplaced shops and
nice
unplaced people that can just show up.
So it's kind of like Notion. I use a bit of my Notion notes to do that sort of work, but it sounds way more complete than what I do in Notion, because Notion's more like I think it's meant for like maybe dev work or something. And
similar to like OneNote, how a lot of people will use OneNote too.
Yeah, exactly. Very cool. So I'll make sure to check out Legend Keeper. Any other shout outs? I know you have like a specific Discord that you like to hang out at. Why don't you tell me about it?
The biggest public one I hang out in would be Happy Jax. I don't know the exact.
I'll Google it while you tell our audience about Happy Jax. Why don't you tell me about it?
It's one of the first audio sort of podcasts and everything I got into. Happy Jax Rpg Podcast. It's a group of guys down in the US who play a lot of music, love D&D, and well, not necessarily D&D. They're big proponents of other games like Savage Worlds, Vampire, GURPS, basically everything but D&D.
Nice.
But they full of advice, and they've been doing a podcast for years. They're on like season 25 or something.
Oh geez, yeah.
And they just go steady, and they're just such a close-knit community, so friendly.
So Happy Jax RPG. If you have, I think it's one of the things that comes up on Google. I don't actually know it, so I'll refrain from linking it just because I'm not 100% making sure I'm putting the right thing in there. Before I get to the last thing, then I guess since you've talked about a couple times, at least you referenced it. Are there any systems that exist out there that you haven't had a chance to try that are not Dungeons and Dragons that you would like to try and just haven't had time to explore or get a chance to get at the table?
One that I've tried a few times a little bit, but never had a chance to fully play properly is Shadowrun. It's one, I love the world building, I love the lore, I love the way it's all set up, but it's just such a complex system and so kind of, I guess the best way to put it is gritty. Not gritty, crunchy.
Okay.
So many numbers, so many things to follow, so many things to do. And like if you get into it and you don't limit your players, like you don't say no, you could be running 3 simultaneous combats in 3 different combat systems all at once.
Oh, wow.
When you have your wizard projecting into the astral to try and deal with elementals and spirits, and then you have a technomancer uploading himself into the internet to try and hack through doorways, and then you have people in what they call meat space doing shooting, fighting, everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And these can happen at the same time.
Nice.
And are completely separate systems from each other.
Mm. Meat space, I like that. I've heard that term before in sci-fi games.
Yeah, it's definitely Shadowrun's definitely a fun one when it comes down to that sort of stuff, and
Nice.
it's one I want to play, but it's very hard to run.
Well, maybe you can reach out to Jordan. I think he's it might be in one of his talent pool. So feel free to reach out, see if he's offered to run games that are not D&D for us a few times. So maybe we can take him up on it. So as the last thing before we close out for our interview, Dylan, usually on Mondays on this channel, for anyone who doesn't know who is new, I do one-shot Mondays over my lunch break. Take an hour where I take a hook that's given by our guest on Sundays, and we try to elaborate and create either a one-shot adventure or a mini arc that I then flesh out to the best of my ability, and then later put online for free for anyone to use in a subreddit, the Adventure Week subreddit. Do you have a hook, a thought, a location, anything that we can dig our teeth into that we can try to create a one-shot based off of?
Well, I was thinking about this because I saw you were doing it with everyone else, and I saw. So the idea I came up with kind of links into the way I like doing my world building with everything unplaced and just modular. Something to do with something below an alchemist shop. The shop and some sort of maybe a dungeon below it, or a cabal that's been built up under it, or something that's happening beneath the alchemist
Something
shop.
that is happening beneath the alchemist shop. I love it. I already have a lot of ideas when you just told me. Preview alert. I'll tell you where my brain went. What happens to the remains of those potions and alchemical concoctions that don't pan out and he throws away? Where does that stuff go? And what happens to the ground beneath and maybe the well water of the village that it might be nearby? Something to think on.
Ooh,
so that's very cool. I appreciate that. So Dylan, any final shout outs or anything else that you want to leave us with before we close out the stream for today?
No, I think I've shouted out about everything I have. I will be starting to post more on my Twitter, which we talked about before.
Yes, your Twitter is
the one we linked at Wizard18, WHIZZARD, as the old comic references.
I will put that in chat, and I will put that in the YouTube description when the video goes up. 100%.
But I'm going to be posting maps at least weekly there from now on. I have hundreds of them in storage that literally sit there doing nothing for me anymore.
Nice.
So I may as well share them to the community.
Awesome.
And I'm going to be posting there as much as I can in the foreseeable future.
That I am clicking that follow button. I can always use more maps, and you and I both use Foundry. So I'm sure I'll be fine.
I scale them to Foundry, actually. They're all at the 100 grid, 100 pixels per grid that Foundry defaults to.
Perfect. That's amazing. So there, you have a brand new follower. I encourage anybody who has Foundry or wants maps for their games, always a struggle. That's amazing. Perfect. Well, thanks very much for coming on the show, Dylan.
Thank you very much for having me.
I appreciate your time. Anybody else who's in chat, just as a reminder that this show is about elevating the DMs and GMs that do all the hard work, or some of the hard work. The players kind of do something too, I guess. We don't have an audience of hundreds of thousands. We have people who come in every week to your game for you. Dylan, it sounds like you have 6 players, maybe more across multiple games. I'm sure they appreciate all the work that you do. You are a pillar of the community, of the DMing community, for your players, for your community here in Ottawa as well. So just a big shout out. Thank you very much for your time, and well done.
Well, thank you, and well, it's always been interesting talking with a DM who's more experienced than I have life experience.
That's okay. Thanks for what a polite way of saying that I'm old as hell. Thanks, Dylan.
Hey, I'm just at a university.
Yeah,
I think one of the youngest people in our little community.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll be back later tonight. I think I have a variety stream, possibly honestly going to be either Magic the Gathering, Among Us, or something else. I'm not quite sure. Maybe some GeoGuessr, and we'll try to break our streak. If you have any recommendations, or if you're interested in appearing on the show, please reach out to me either through Discord that is attached in the description of the channel, or by Twitter. And thanks for tuning in, everyone, and have a lovely rest of your Sunday.
Have a good weekend, everyone.
All right, stay on the phone or stay on the line for a second. I just muted the stream properly. Thank you. Actually, I should, out of politeness, raid somebody because the D&D community is so. Oh, I did mute. And 3, 2, 1. We'll just end the stream. I don't know.